I declare war. I did a video about Dr. James David Manning. And this guy named Fearless2008 did a response video. And this video that I'm doing right now is a reply to his response. His video was interesting. He made some good points in his video. But I'm going to, provide my response here. The first thing I want to point out is that if you're going to do a response video, at least know who you are responding to. You did a response video and you said it was in response to David Carroll. David Carroll did not do the video. You know that now because I put comments in your video and you changed the title. And I'm glad you changed the title, but still in your video, you repeatedly refer to David Carroll. And if anyone is familiar with my channel and David Carroll's channel, they would know that there's no way that you can mix the two of us up. And I frankly find it to be an insult, but I'll overlook that because you obviously didn't know, that it was my video, not David Carroll's video for some reason. We're on the, opposite ends of the issues, in terms of me and David Carroll. So how someone can confuse the two of us is beyond me. And, as I said, I find it to be an insult, that somebody would actually compare, my video or actually think that it's David Carroll's video. I pointed out in video after video how that guy is nothing but a tap dancing Uncle Ruckus, a bootlicker, a butt kisser, and all that. So for you to confuse him with me is an insult. But I get it, and I'll move beyond that and deal with the substance of your video. Now, in your video, you talked about how David Manning was correct in his assessment of black people as being good slaves. And I'm not going to go into, why I strongly oppose that argument, that basic argument, because I did a whole video about it. And for those that want to see the video, if you haven't seen it, I will include a link in the description to this video where I fully explain about our whole tradition of resistance to slavery and, our history of greatness that establishes the point that we are not good slaves. Now, in your video, you made comparisons to Jews and their experience during the Holocaust. You compared that to the African American experience during slavery. Now, I just wanted to point out that those two situations and groups of people cannot be compared, at least in this context. There are some similarities between the suffering of Jews and African Americans, but, with respect to slavery and the Holocaust, there is no comparison. First of all, the Holocaust only lasted for approximately 4 years. Slavery lasted for hundreds of years. It lasted for centuries. So that's one thing. And when you look at the number of people who died during both events, far more people died during the Middle Passage than died during that Holocaust that the Jews experienced. Now, don't get me wrong, the Holocaust was a horrific event. It's something that I condemn. And, I stand with any people who suffer. So this is not a slight towards Jews or anything like that. But facts are facts. There's simply no comparison. The Jews before the Holocaust were established people in Germany. And, that brings me to another point. The Holocaust did not even take place in America. So for someone to compare the plight of American Jews to the plight of African Americans, that's completely inaccurate. That's an inaccurate, comparison. They're apples and oranges. But anyway, going back to the Jews in Germany, They were established people. They had businesses. They had banks. They owned, businesses in their community. They were professional people, many of them. They were doctors, lawyers, well established within the German society. And, all of that changed after the Holocaust. They were stripped of their property and their rights and all that kind of stuff. And they were regulated to concentration camps. But during their entire Holocaust, they maintained their identity. They still had a knowledge of self. They still spoke Yiddish. They still knew Hebrew. They still knew about their religious traditions. They still had a sense of pride amongst them because they had a belief system that was not shattered during the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust was very brief, as I mentioned before. So that situation cannot be compared to the African Americans' plight. All of us were taken across the ocean, taken across the Atlantic Ocean, and brought to a foreign land. We were stripped of our languages through generations of programming and conditioning. We were stripped of our original customs, our original languages, our original religions. We were denied the right to read. We were denied the right to practice our traditional religions and customs. And they separated the children from the parents to create a slave, to program a person or condition a person to be a slave. They stripped us of our very humanity. They stripped us of our human dignity. And they created something less than the original. We were transformed from kings and queens, from men and women, in the words of Tupac's, to niggas and hoes and bitches. That's what the system created over centuries and over time. So we were denied a knowledge of ourselves. And without knowledge of self, you can't become a builder. Now, there are many who have gained knowledge of self, and they are builders in our community. There are plenty of established African Americans, plenty of business owners, plenty of African American CEOs, African American doctors and lawyers, politicians. There are builders in our community, but there is a whole segment of our society, of the African American community, that has been locked out from the American dream. They have been boxed in by the conditions that they face. They are the products of their environment. When you are raised in an environment of poverty, when you're raised in an environment of inferior schools, when you are raised in an environment of unemployment, and when you combine that with the influx of guns and drugs, you have a toxic environment. And when someone is in such a toxic environment, they exhibit toxic behavior. So you can't look at the crime in the Black community in isolation. You have to look at the conditions in the community that create the crime. You have to look at what are called crimogenic conditions in the community in order to evaluate the situation. If someone has been deprived of knowledge of themselves, if they have been deprived of the avenues of opportunity, then yes, they will resort to crime. Yes, they will resort to so-called pathological behavior. But what is really pathological is the society that neglects whole segments of society based on the race of the people. And that's what we have in these inner cities: neglect. Benign neglect by the government. Benign neglect by society. These communities are abandoned for the most part. When violence occurs in those communities, no one cares. They take it as if it is normal. It has become the norm. So instead of bashing the victims, we need to talk about creating a situation where the conditions in those communities change. And you talked about, instead of building society, we are building prisons. And we're building funeral homes. Again, there is some truth to what you're talking about. But it's important, again, to understand why that is happening. It's not happening simply because Black people lack values. If you put any other people in the same condition, you would have the same results. Unlike the Jews, many of us don't have a knowledge of self. We don't know about our greatness as a people. We don't even know what tribes we come from or what ethnic groups we come from on the continent, because we've been deprived of a knowledge of self. We don't even have a sense of our history. We don't know about our greatness, many of us. Many of us don't know about the great African kingdoms that established human civilization. All we know is the negative image that has been put out there. And these images shape our consciousness. You talked about colorism. Africans did not come from Africa with that colorism notion or with the idea of self-hatred. That was something that was created over generations. Somebody taught us to hate ourselves. Someone programmed us to hate ourselves. They gave us caricatures of ourselves. They gave us the menstrual images of Blackness. And those images taught us to hate ourselves. They told us that we were from a race of savages and cannibals and animals. So because of all that programming over centuries, we have lost the knowledge of ourselves. So when you don't have that knowledge, of course you're not going to build. Of course you're not going to develop civilization. Our people need knowledge of self. That's what we need. When we have that knowledge, we will build. When we are given the opportunity to compete on a level playing field, we will be competitive. And, in the words of Marcus Garvey, we can do it and we shall do it. We shall build. And, back to this whole issue of crime. It's important to note that African Americans do not use drugs or sell drugs any more frequently than anyone else in America. In fact, white people sell drugs more frequently and they use drugs more frequently than African Americans. And this is pointed out in Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. But what you have in America is selective enforcement of drug laws. And that is why you have so many African Americans in the prison industrial complex, being the new slaves. And until you are willing to speak out about that, to speak out about selective enforcement of drug laws, you can't criticize the African American community. You have to criticize the conditions that created the ghettos, that created the ghetto state of mind.